Hey guys, what's up? Day 4 of the major and thus the challenger stage has now come to a conclusion. We know which teams have been eliminated and which teams are going to progress going through into the Legends stage. I'm Vince, joined again by Dualism, and we're going to have a slightly different format today because obviously the entire stage has come to an end, and therefore we're going to talk about more overarching stories, overarching points that we've really noticed. Before we do get into some of the finer details, Dualism, is there anything from your perspective in particular that you want to discuss that really jumps to your mind after we've just reached the end of the challenger stage?
I think one of the big things is the fact that and I think I kind of mentioned this previously, but a lot of the younger talents and a lot of the less battle hardened sort of up and coming players didn't really have too many of the expected land nerves or potentially being intimidated by the rowdy crowd. It feels like a lot of players were able to just kind of step up and play the game without any kind of negative or positive, in the case of some of the Brazilian teams, impact from the crowd in general.
That's a very good point. I mean, normally it's a narrative and a point that we bring up is, this player is inexperienced and this player may be feeling the nerves a little bit, etc. But for the most part, I didn't notice that. The only time I really did notice it was maybe Game of Legion today against Cloud9 and OG in some areas against Vitality, with the fact that they did have less experience. And obviously in Game of Legion's perspective, they were 2-0 at one stage, looking good for a potential 3-0. Then they end up going on a 3-loss streak, which, to be fair, is against 3 legitimate teams. 3 teams that all did progress themselves, of course. But there were moments where I felt like maybe there were some jitters coming in. But for the most part, yeah, absolutely. It felt as if a lot of those younger players really stood up and wanted to be counted.
I feel like a lot of the kind of issues with some of those teams, though, were mistakes that could happen to any team that were not particularly organized, or perhaps, if a team had had roster changes, could easily be making similar mistakes. It didn't feel like one individual wasn't showing up, or a few young players were lost. It felt more so that some teams maybe lacked the cohesion that you'd have in a more experienced or a longer lasting sort of lineup. But yeah, I can agree with what you said as well.
And I think that brings us nicely to one of our first sort of main points of this roundup, and that is the biggest surprise category. Normally we do the ups, the downs, and the indifference, or the good, the bad, and the mess. But for this one, I think biggest surprise overall in the group stage, I have got big down as one of mine. I've actually got 2, and they're both positives because obviously the surprise can be good or bad. I've got big down as mine, and it kind of goes back to what you were just alluding to there and touching on, with the change of Sin coming in, and with that effect, Big's overarching strategies or tactics, would it allow some weaknesses to be dissected and really made the most of? And for the most part, in all honesty, no. They looked incredibly good. They kind of breezed through 3-1, their only loss being to the hands of Bad News Eagles. And I think Big proved a lot of naysayers wrong, and they certainly proved me wrong. I didn't even have them to go through in my pick'ems.
I also didn't have them going through. I think, having to have a stand in and having kind of come in against a very mixed bag of challenger teams, that there wasn't really an obvious weak team, even though I think a lot of people were expecting the Greyhounds and the IHCs of the group to struggle. Even they surprised. So the group was entirely open for the majority of it, and Big having Surison is just so big for them. He was the third best performer in the stage, and I think that is one of the big factors for them, no pun intended, in their success, even with uh, a stand-in and probably being in a less than ideal scenario roster-wise.
Sure, I actually wrote down Searson's ratings, his individual ratings of all 4 of his matches, including a 1.55, 1.71, 1.35, 1.11. The lowest rating he had was a 1.11, and he has been lights out, as you said. Like, he's come out recently and said, I don't care what you think of me. I know I'm a great player. I know I'm a top tier player. He's come under a lot of fire over the last year or so, I would say. And it's great to see him come to a major, kind of put his performance on the ground and just basically put it down there as a yardstick and say, right, you have to try and match me now. It has been an interesting challenger stage of similar performances like that, really, though. I mean, you've seen Shiro do the same kind of thing with Cloud9, sometimes dragging them kicking and screaming towards the finish line. Like, he's just been unbelievable. But it's been really good to see Big step away from the shadows a little bit, and Searson in particular have a genuine, fantastic stage that people, they can't deny his ability when he's on form.
For sure, and I know a lot of people do joke about Surison and the fact that he really does need to have a scoped weapon in his hands, or he's not quite as impactful as maybe some other players like a Zaiwu would be, because he can just, perform with anything. But if actually he can put up such huge numbers when he does have the AWP, I think, you know what, you might as well give it to him.
Definitely. I mean, he's there as an AWPer first and foremost. Obviously, being versatile is never a bad thing, but if they play around that, then you can't argue with the results, and the results are simply put that Big made it 3-1. Who was your biggest surprise of this challenger stage?
I think OG not making it, despite the fact that they had that younger sort of lineup, was a surprise for me, especially looking at how some of the other teams had struggled initially with when you have Vitality and Cloud9 not really looking too strong. I really thought that they would be able to capitalize and kind of have youth and hope in their eyes push them further than maybe some of these veteran teams. But the fact that they just kind of ran out of steam towards the end was a bit of a surprise for me and quite disappointing to see, really.
I think it was, unfortunately, went up against Vitality, and even then it took a very good Zaiwu performance to dig Vitality out of a bit of a deep ditch. The first map going to OT, of course, and Zaiwu doing Zaiwu things. It is a bit grim, though, when I also look at their results in this stage. It's kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde feeling I have with this, where there are only 2 wins to the hands of Greyhound and IHC, 2 of the weaker teams in the Challenger stage, but they did lose to Fnatic and Furia and Vitality, so they're getting beat off 3 legit teams. All of those teams end up going through to the Legend stage, and I was a little bit disappointed for them as well. I think they're going to be absolutely gutted. But yeah, it did feel a little bit underwhelming considering they came out the block so strong. And I felt as if really very few of these teams, with the exception of Mouse and Bad News Eagles for me, you can probably put Big into the category as well, looked really, really on point the entire time. It felt like there was a lot of teams here, Dualism, in this challenger stage that were a little bit off kilter. And I feel like OG are a team that could have exploited that, and they'll be devastated that they haven't.
100%. And the contrast is with then looking at a team like Mouse that also have young players, less experienced players, have had roster changes relatively recently, but they were able to get a convincing 3-0. They beat Outsiders, they beat Fnatic, they also beat, Evil Geniuses, which isn't saying much, but they also didn't have an easy RMR run. And so they were able to look that much stronger in not too dissimilar situation to OG currently.
So for my other surprise, I said I had 2 good surprises. The other one was Bad News Eagles. And although you can put the caveat in that their first game was against 00 Nation, which, I mean, they went 0-3 and looked pretty shoddy to say the least, the nature in which they beat Big, the nature in which they, to be honest, completely wrecked Gamer Legion, for me was very impressive. And I've got to be honest, I felt, not that the last major was a fluke for Bad News Eagles, but when we were coming into this, I believe you said yesterday they'd only played like 5 maps on LAN, and it was a random sort of like check LAN, and really hard to gauge like where they were as a team. I was looking at some of their online performances. I thought it was a very worrisome sign, but they still come in. They just lay down the law. They get the best round difference out of any team with plus 34 and 3 consecutive wins. And for that, I've just got to tip my hat and say, like, fair enough. Like, they've definitely stood up. Rigon in particular has had a great major. We were talking about Searson putting up some big performances. He got a 1.53 against Gamer Legion in their 3-0 match. He got a 1.67 rating against 00 Nation. But it's like the whole team is just playing for each other. They're trade fragging. There's a great atmosphere. They're all smiles. They're just having a good time. And it's infectious. That kind of enjoyment is infectious to watch. And you're seeing it's getting great results for them on the server as well.
100%. I said previously that I thought I was indifferent to their run initially because, yeah, they hadn't really faced any of the real heavy hitters in the challenger stage. But the fact that they definitely outperform some of the other teams facing these, quote quote weaker teams in the group, they have a ridiculously, as you say, like close together set of statistics. There isn't just one carry. Everybody is pulling the weight that is required of them, and I do think that is something that a lot of the other teams really were not able to do. And the 3-0, you can't argue with the 3-0. It's not bad, I'd say.
It's a bit flawless. It's a bit perfect. Not dropping a single map. They didn't even lose a map against Game of Legion, so they went through the only team, incidentally, that has gone through unscathed without dropping a single map, because Mouse, of course, they ended up beating Fnatic 2-1 in their 3-0, so that's been very impressive. In terms of going maybe from a little bit of a positive into a bit more of a negative, who was your most underwhelming team, or the one that you were kind of thinking, I wish things had gone slightly better?
I'd say like the rest of the Brazilian teams in Zero Zero Nation and Imperial, because you have a Brazilian major, you have a Brazilian crowd, you have all the support, you're in your time zone, you have every advantage that I think any team could wish to have. And the fact that they couldn't win a map on stage has to be devastating, not just for them, but for the crowd. Who probably were hoping for maybe a bit more Brazilian representation moving throughout the tournament.
Yeah, as it stands, of course, just Furia, who went through 3-1, and collectively those two Brazilian teams went 0-6. They're only picking up one map, and that was 0-0 Nation against IHC in their 0-3 game. It's hard to argue with that, really. I'm completely on board. I was thinking of putting Imperial as my underwhelming team, but to be honest, I was very much on the full romance of the situation of being in a Brazilian crowd. Fallen potentially at his last major, although it's not confirmed. How many more opportunities is he and this team going to get to actually get to a major of this stature? Plus, on Brazilian soil, I was really carried away by the romance of the whole situation. But the fact of the matter is, they just got comprehensively outplayed, both Imperial and 0-0 Nation. And as you say, the crowd very bitterly disappointed. At least they have Furia to completely get behind, and Furia looked pretty good, all things considered. But yeah, I don't know where they go from here either, Dualism. Like, I'm looking at Imperial, I'm looking at 0-0 Nation. This is obviously a devastating turn of affairs, not to even win a single game and to go out 0-3 on pretty much the second day. Is there a track towards redemption here, or is this maybe the end of the line for Imperial in terms of playing at this kind of caliber?
I know Fallen in an interview said that he'd still wanted to play for about another year, I think he said. So in theory, that would give him the chance to play at 2 more majors. But again, the revamped major system, I think they'd have to go through open qualifiers again, if I'm not mistaken. But even if actually all you do is get through to an RMR, considering the Americas RMR had, evil geniuses going 3-0 in them, who knows in a year's time how that landscape is going to look. It might not be as easy as just qualifying again, especially if this was the result of the best performances of Imperial. It's one of those things where, yeah, a lot of the younger teams were able to do it a lot better, and it does kind of feel like we are kind of in this time period of CS where some of the old guard really can't keep up with some of these newer players and these younger teams. That it's not a matter of hunger, it is just a matter of who can actually deliver on the day.
And they certainly couldn't, even with all of the added incentives to do that. I think that's a good segue as well onto my most underwhelming team, because you did briefly mention them, and it is Evil Geniuses. I guess I had less expectations of 0-0 Nation in particular. With EG, this is more of an over sort of view of where they are as an org and where they are as a team. Their only win was against IHC, of course. They did take them down. I think it was 16-9. But it just feels like this team is making up the numbers. At no point do I have any confidence that they'll actually string some results together, that they'll actually get out of like one of these challenger stages. I didn't have them down as my pick'ems. I never even thought of having them down as my pick'ems. I just don't know where they go from here. Like, obviously, Hext and Neelan only joining the team back in August, I think it was, so they haven't been there for a huge amount of time. But I just don't nowhere EG are going to find that extra level where they can step up to like a liquid level, or they can stand up to a position where you're expecting them to maybe squeak out a challenger stage at 3-2 or 3-1. They feel so far off the pace.
I know that a lot of the thought behind this EG roster is building for the future. It is a long term project, but I feel like every time teams say this and organizations have squads that are meant to be long term, it feels like an excuse, and it feels like a way of deflecting criticism by saying, "Oh, but we've only been together a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. We need more time to show our true form or to get everything together." And it reminds me of when Existence, when he went back to G2 in I think 2018, and he said, "Yeah, give me a year and this team might be good." There isn't that time to give to a team to get good in the future. There has to be that progression or these signs of life that the team is actually progressing. And I think a lot of the looking to the future is almost like, yeah, we can be bad for 10 months, but oh, just wait for the 11th month, we'll suddenly get good, which I don't think is has ever happened or will ever happen with a team.
No, and esports has too fast a turnaround period as well. Like 10 months in esports is considerably longer in any other metric of time. That's years in other sports. And you very rarely get afforded that kind of a luxury. So it really comes down for me, like, what do EG want to accomplish? Are they content with going out 1-3 in the challenger stage? Are they content with being a team that's never really seriously going to go that far in events and actually compete and really try and take away championships? I think this is a team that, honestly, with Cirque and Breeze, you're expecting it to be better. Automatic, another player that I know people were kind of hype about, but I didn't really see much from him at all in this event. And so those are all very underwhelming aspects for me, where I don't know what the future holds. Like, if they can get to the next major with this current roster, maybe with some extra time with Hext and Neelan, maybe. But as you said, it's like, at what point do you decide, right, screw it, this isn't working, we need to make drastic changes? So, speaking on the other side of things, drastic changes will be made going through into the Legend stage, because obviously we have some of the heavy hitters, the big boys, the big guns coming out, the likes of FaZe, the Liquids, etc. Which of these teams, if any, do you think have a good chance of not just making it through the challenges, but through the Legends as well and into the playoffs?
I think that things are very stacked, and it's hard to really say with too much confidence that any of these teams could really impress. But if I had to put money on it, I feel like Mao's had the best performances so far in the challenger stage, so it would have to be them, or probably an outsiders, just simply because it feels like no matter what you do, no matter how down and out they seem, they'll just come back out of nowhere and just off the top rope jump on you and just crush you out of nowhere. And I think that they're probably the safe bet, I would say.
Very interesting, because I had the exact same two teams on my mind as well. I think outsiders are that quintessential team that can have a terrible start, as they did against Mouse, losing 16-6, but they're just so good at grinding and drawing out wins, like down but never out. Fame having a great tournament is definitely a bonus as well. So I'll also add another team to the mix. I'm going to go in for that drama again. I'm going to go in for that romance. I'm going to say Furia can maybe do it. They're a team that seems to always get to the playoffs, but then just fail in the quarterfinals. It's like a recurring theme with these guys. So maybe fully taking the pressure of the Brazilian crowd on Brazilian soil, they're going to be able to harness it and actually put it into good place and maybe get some W's. They didn't have the hardest of runs. They got a win against Double O Nation, OG, and Gamer Legion. But I still have to believe that Furia, with the firepower they have with K-Serato, Yuri, Drop actually had some really big performances as well, and Safe did too, that this is a team that could go pretty far. But again, the standings are just stepping up so much. Like, it's going to be way harder in the Legends stage, you would have to assume. I suppose, to play devil's advocate on that, though, as well, Dualism, a lot of these teams have actually played significant amounts of Counter-Strike now. They're more settled in. I saw on Twitter that Carrigan was just leaving for Brazil today. So maybe that's something that factors in, that some of these teams have already had a little bit of time to kind of settle themselves in and get started in the best possible way when it comes to the legend stage.
I have one question. Just what flavor is that Brazilian copium you're on? Because I just think there's so many teams that, yeah, even if they're not settled, even if they arrive 5 minutes before their games, I feel like there are way too many bear traps of teams that could easily crush those little Brazilian dreams into 1,000 pieces.
It's certainly possible, and do you know what? Because the pick'ems are probably going to be unlocked for the legend stage later. I'm not even sure I'll put Furia in my pick'ems. I think it is super hard, as you just mentioned before. It's so stacked. It's really difficult. It's probably one of the most competitive majors that we've had in however long, like a super, super long time. There's a lot of teams that I expected to do better in the challenger stage that kind of missed the boat completely. I'm not confident Vitality or Cloud9 make it to the playoffs the way they've been playing. I'm not entirely confident that Bad News Eagles will make it either, even though I've put the caveat in that they did so well in this stage. I'm not sure they'll be able to handle the step up in the next one, but I guess only time will tell. Finally, I believe you got 5 pick'ems correct. I think it was saved on the last day, is that right?
Yeah, I needed well, I had OG and Vitality, and either of those would have done. I needed Cloud9 or then 9Z to make it, and Cloud9 remembered how to play the game, so I got my 5. Yeah.
Same. I was sat there watching Cloud9, not gonna lie, was stressed, was nervous, was sweating a little bit, but they managed to get it done in the end. Although Game of Legion, to be fair, they could have actually had that in the first map in particular, so they'll be gutted, they'll be devastated, but I'll pick them survive for now. Thank you very much for your company. Once again, Dualism, we will come back for the next stage, guys, so we will see you there. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.